Do you like Plants vs. Zombies? Do you like winning games? Then we got the deck for you, the Necrobloom. This is my personal favorite and strongest deck. When Modern Horizons 3 just got spoiled, I instantly fell in love with this card. And I've built it when it released, and I've been playing it ever since. It's a very strong commander that will grind out your opponents, generate a lot of value, and it's really hard for opponents to interact with. So how it works is it's basically a Field of the Dead with an added bonus. So whenever you play a land on landfall, you get a plant token. When you have 7 or more different named lands, you get a zombie token instead. Its most unique ability is giving every land card in your graveyard Dredge 2. Dredge is well known as one of the more broken mechanics. Dredge basically allows you to replace any draw with the Dredge mechanic, allowing you to mill 2 cards and return a land card from your graveyard to your hand, giving us immense recursion value. So today I will be showing you the entire deck list, every single card that's included and why it's included. I divided them up in 6 categories, being the value engines, interaction spells, ramp spells, support spells, the utility lands, and the regular lands. In the end, I will also have a little section explaining the combos in this deck and how we win the game. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first card we're going to be talking about is Elvish Reclaimer. It's an awesome card. We can just sacrifice a land and tutor any land from our deck, which allows us to get the pieces we need. Also, by sacrificing a land, we fill up the graveyard and we can dredge the cards back later. Also has a really good interaction with Flagstones of Torquir. Next up, we have one of the newer cards, a reference to an older card, Knight of the Reliquary. This version is White of the Reliquary. So basically, she allows us to sacrifice creatures, mainly our plants or zombie tokens we generate with the Necrobloom, to allow us to get any land on instant speed as well. As you can see, we run a lot of effects to tutor up lands on instant speed. It will become clear once we show the utility lands. She also gets +1/+1 for every creature card in your graveyard, so she provides a really big vigilance body to attack with as well. Next up we have Lotus Cobra. Yeah, it's a classic card, everyone knows it. On landfall you get 1 mana of any color. Provides for awesome ramp on turn 2 if you can get it out early. It also sets up explosive turns where you can generate a ton of mana by just playing lands or playing a fetch land, getting 2 mana out of it. And it's also used in some of our combos. Aftermath Analyst, what's not to love about this guy? He's a 2-drop. He provides mill when he enters the battlefield. For 4 mana, we can sacrifice him to basically get a free Splendid Reclamation, returning all our lands from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, getting a lot of landfall triggers. And we also use him in a lot of our combos. Very solid card. Absolute auto-inclusion in the deck. Moving on, we have another card from Modern Horizons 3. It was released together with Necrobloom, and yeah, it's an auto-inclusion in any landfall deck as well. So when it's on the battlefield and you play a land, you get a 1/1 insect token. Beautiful thing is, you can also bestow it on one of your creatures, and whenever you play a land, you can pay 2 mana to copy the creature it's bestowed onto, so it copies any of our value pieces. Also has a really good interaction together with Dryad Arbor, because it triggers itself. Okay, next up, we have an all-time classic, Knight of the Reliquary. So this card has been around for ages. It allows us to sacrifice lands to tutor up any land on instant speed, so we can get any utility land we need. And she also gets +1/+1 for every land card in the graveyard, which will be a lot in this deck. So it's a really big body, allows us to tutor, and fills the graveyard. Perfect fit for the deck. Azusa, classic card. You think this is an auto-inclusion in any landfall deck? This is actually a card I'm thinking about cutting from the deck. She's been underperforming. It's awesome to play 2 additional lands every turn, but in most scenarios you just don't have the lands to play. When you have effects that allow you to play lands from your graveyard, then she's great. But in other scenarios she's just not that good, so I'm actually looking to replace her. I don't have enough fingers on my hand to count how many games this 3-drop has won me. All-time classic, Skewed Swarm. Yeah, it's a 3-drop that wins the game. It's self-explanatory. Auto-inclusion any landfall deck. When you play a land, you get a 1/1 insect token. You have 6 or more lands, you get a copy of itself. The copies are exponential. When the chain gets going and you have fetch lands to combine things, extra land drops every turn, you can just overwhelm the board. Usually you need about 4 land drops with this on the field. If it doesn't get answered, you just win the game with Infinite Insect. Moving on, we have Tireless Provisioner. Basically Lotus Cobra, but with treasure tokens. So whenever you play a land, you get a treasure or a food token. We'll mainly be using this for treasures. It sets up for explosive turns. We use it in combos. Later in the game, when you're able to generate infinite mana with one of the combos, you can also generate infinite food tokens and gain infinite life that way, which might win you the game. Ugliest creature in this deck, Plateau Farmer. One of the Fallout cards. It uses red counters, which are great in our deck. They allow us to mill ourselves even when the creature is removed. Plateau Farmer also gives us an awesome way to reuse milled lands. So when a land gets milled, we can tap him and we can put the land into play tapped. One of my favorite arts in the deck is Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Auto include in any landfall deck as well. Allows you to tap any land for any color. So you can tap your lands that don't actually produce mana for mana, which is great. And she allows you to play an extra land every turn. Great value. Next up we have Steve version 2. It's also a snake, allows us to play land cards from our graveyard for a 3-drop. Scales really well with fetch lands, for example. And when you have things that allow you to play additional lands every turn. Yeah, I know. Another Modern Horizons 3 card. The set was basically made for Necrobloom. 6. He provides self-mill, and he gives every non-land permanent in our graveyard retrace. You can basically cast the card again by discarding a land. You will always have lands on hand because of the Dredge mechanic on Necrobloom. We also need this card to win when we mill our entire deck into our graveyard. So he's actually an invaluable combo piece. And he's a beautiful card. Look at this little bird on his finger. Another iteration of Lotus Cobra, but way better, is Nissa, Resurgent Animist. So she has the same effect as Lotus Cobra, granting you 1 mana of any color whenever you play a land, but she has a bonus ability. Whenever you play your second land every turn, you get to flip cards from the top of your library until you hit an elf or an elemental. We play a lot of those, so I'll flash them in on the screen. Really relevant ability. Gets our Lumra, Avenger of Zendikar, any of our mana dorks, all to include in any landfall deck. You must play this card. The next card is a combination of 2 of the most hated cards in Magic, Thalia and the Gitrog monster. Where to start with this absolute powerhouse. She has First Strike, she has Death Touch, so basically she kills anything she gets into combat with. Perfect blocker, kills everything, even the biggest Eldrazi there is. Allows us to play an additional land every turn. She's an invaluable stacks piece. Nothing is more annoying for your opponents than having every non-basic land and every creature enter tapped. When you play this card, everyone on the table will target you, for sure. Whenever she attacks, you can also sacrifice a land, which is actually a benefit for us. And you get to draw a card, so you can just sacrifice a land and dredge it back. This was actually the first commander I wanted to play in my landfall deck, but Necrobloom is just better in the commander slot. Thalia is better in the 99. We're also playing Merfolk's World Shaper. He provides self-mill when he attacks. When he dies, we get a free Splendid Reclamation, returning all our lands from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. We can combo this with Phyrexian Tower, for example. Perfect combo to get a lot of lands out really early on. One of the newest additions to the deck is Hedge Shredder. It's pretty self-explanatory. Whenever a land gets milled from your deck to your graveyard, you get to put it into play tapped instead. This gets out of hand really quick with all the self-mill effects we're playing. We can also crew it with one of our zombie tokens to attack and self-mill ourselves more, getting more lands into play. Awesome card. Very underrated card in this deck as well is another iteration of the Gitrog monster, not the original one. Gitrog the Ravenous Rite. It's an Outlaws card with trample and haste, so it has an immediate impact when it hits the board, and we can settle it with one of our zombie tokens. When we settle it, we get to sacrifice a zombie, and we get to draw that many cards and put that many additional lands into play. You can do a lot of gimmicks with this card by dredging the lands you draw. When you have the Necrobloom on the field, you can actually replace a draw that Gitrog gives you with Dredge. You get to put the 2 land cards into your hand, and then you can play them with this effect. Awesome card. Very underrated. Yeah, everyone knew the next card was going to be included, the original Gitrog monster. There's no reason not to play this. He has Death Touch. He is an engine by himself. He usually wins games when he hits the table. You get to sacrifice land, play additional lands, and whenever a land gets put into the graveyard from anywhere, you get to draw a card, which you can replace with Dredge. If you mill lands with the Dredge, you get to dredge more, and it's an infinite cycle, really. When you play the Gitrog, it's really easy to get your entire deck into the graveyard, which is exactly what we want. This is one of our curve toppers we play in the deck, Ancient Green Warden. He doubles our landfall triggers. He allows us to play lands from the graveyard. Not that good of a card. We need some things to top the curve in the deck, so it's a solid card. It's an elemental, so when we get to flip cards with Nissa, this is actually one of the targets we can hit. All-time classic card, Sun Titan. Holds a piece in my heart. It really does, especially this version. Awesome recursion piece, gets back our combo pieces in the graveyard. We can get lands back. Any permanent that costs 3 mana or less on ETB and on attack. Really awesome to top our curve as well. In the 7-drop slot, we play Cultivator Colossus. He gets power and toughness equal to the lands you have in play. He also has trample, so you can actually win games with him. Most important reason we play this is a combo. I will be explaining this later on. He's a 2-card combo together with Necrobloom. Check out the combo section in the end of the video to have this explained to you. Not the most powerful card in the deck for 7 mana, but it's an awesome way to win the game. It's Avenger of Zendikar. Everyone knows this card. It's been around for ages as well. Whenever you play him, you get plants equal to the lands you control. Whenever you play another land, you get a +1/+1 counter on every plant you have. Necrobloom is also a plant, so yeah, you can buff your Necrobloom and win on 21 commander damage with the plant. This will never happen, but hey, it's an achievement you can unlock for yourself, I suppose. In my opinion, the strongest card in the entire Bloomburrow set is Lumra. I can't imagine playing Necrobloom without this being in the deck. When you play him, you get to mill yourself, and you get a free Splendid Reclamation, which allows us to return any land from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. His power and toughness are equal to the lands we have in play, so it's a beat stick. We can tutor him up with Green Sun Zenith, Court of Calling. Awesome curve topper, usually win the game when you play this. And we also use him as a combo piece. Next up, we'll be talking about the ramp spells. We'll start off with Farseek, all-time classic. It allows us to get Triome, a Shockland, a Surveil Land, perfect 2-mana acceleration. Nature's Lore allows us to get any forest and put it into play untapped. We can get our Surveil Land, Triome, Shocklands. The untapped part can actually be really relevant in some situations. 3 visits, basically the same reason we play Nature's Lore, it's just the same card with another name. One of the more underrated ramp spells in Necrobloom is Edge of Autumn. It's basically the same effect as Farseek. For 2 mana, we can get any land put into play tapped, but later in the game, we can also cycle it by sacrificing a land, which can be really relevant later into the game, since we need some lands in our graveyard instead of on the battlefield. Cycle ability also gives us card draw or an additional Dredge with Necrobloom on the field. Everyone's favorite, Steve. It's 2 mana ramp spell. He also serves as a chum blocker by declaring blockers and then sacrificing him. You get a land and you get to prevent one attacker from damaging you. Sylvan's Crying doesn't really ramp us, but it allows us to tutor any land in our deck and put it into our hand. Really relevant being a toolbox deck. We really need to get specific pieces at the right time. We're even playing Lord of the Rings card in this deck. Entish Restoration, awesome effect because we get to sacrifice a land, which is really beneficial to us, and we get to ramp. You might be wondering why is Awaken the Woods in the ramp section? Because mostly we play it on turn 3 just to get 1 additional forest and accelerate our mana. Awesome thing about this card is we can also play it the late game to create a lot of forests. They all trigger landfall individually. So if you cast it for 10, you get 10 landfall triggers. Now Necrobloom being in black and white gives us access to the best removal spells in Magic. One of the most efficient removal spells for only 1 mana is Swords to Plowshares. Auto inclusion gets to exile any creature for the small cost of someone gaining life. Same reasoning as the last card, 1 mana, get to exile a creature. Fall to exile. Added benefit, you can exile your own tokens to go get a basic land into play. Get another landfall trigger. Assassin's Trophy, every Golgari deck runs this. Removes any permanent for the small cost of slight ramp to your opponent. Instant speed, awesome. More spot removal, this time with elephants. Generous Gift also destroys any permanent. The 3/3 your opponent gets is irrelevant anyways. This Necrobloom deck also plays a lot of board wipes. First up, Battle of Bywater. Destroys anything with power 3 or greater and grants us food tokens. Now, Necrobloom only has 2 power and the zombies only have 2 power as well. So in most cases, it's a one-sided removal spell. You also get the food tokens, which can be a bonus later in the game. All-time classic, Wrath of God. 4 mana, get to destroy all creatures, can be regenerated. Could also be Damnation, I like the white more. Most underrated card in the deck, maybe in the commander scene in general by far, is Final Showdown. It's a spree card from Outlaws, and it has many different uses. You can make all creatures lose all abilities until the end of the turn, preventing you from losing the game to a combo player. You can give a creature indestructible, and you can wipe the board for 6 mana. And you can combine all 3 by paying the additional costs. What makes this so good is its instant speed. You actually get to wipe the board on instant speed, grant indestructible on instant speed. All creatures lose all abilities on instant speed. If you have not tried this in any of your decks, make sure to try it out. Trust me, you'll love it. What's not to love about Toxic Deluge? Kills indestructible creatures because it uses -X/-X. Necrobloom has 7 toughness, so most of the time you just pay 6 life, kill everything, Necrobloom survives, you get a lot of value out of it. Most efficient board wipe there is, in my opinion. Movie poster version of this just got spoiled in Innistrad Remastered. Classic, Me Too Massacre 1. Serves as a board wipe using -X/-X, so kills indestructible, and it has the added benefit of staying around as an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, every opponent loses 1 life. Whenever an opponent's creature dies, you gain 1 life. Just having this on a battlefield and having opponents interact with each other will actually generate a lot of value if they kill each other's creatures. If your tokens die to one of your own wipes, you get to do a lot of damage. Very solid card. There's a reason this was banned in Standard. Moving on to the next category, the utility spells. First up, Crop Rotation. As mentioned before, we play a lot of effects that allow us to tutor any land from our deck. Crop Rotation is the best. 1 mana, sack a land, and you get to put any land from your deck into play. Untapped, by the way. Really solid card. You need this in any landfall deck. The best card to play on turn 1, Exploration. 1 mana, you get to play 1 additional land every turn. If you get this out on turn 1, you usually win the game. It's just too overwhelming for opponents. Sylvan Safekeeper serves as an awesome way to protect your key creatures by sacrificing lands and giving them hexproof. You can also set up for some really interesting cycles by just allowing you to sacrifice any land on instant speed. Greenstone Zenith, awesome tutor, shuffles itself back into your deck when you play it. We play a lot of green creatures we can get out of our deck, and we also play Dryad Arbor, so you can actually play this on turn 1 for 0 mana as an X cost, and we can get Dryad Arbor out to accelerate our mana. Excellent utility inclusion is Rite of Harmony. When we play this, until the end of the turn, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card, and with Necrobloom on the field, we get the ability to dredge. When we create a token with Necrobloom, which is really easy to do by the way, we also get to draw a card. What makes this card exceptionally good is the fact that it's flashback. So if we are milling ourselves, which is the purpose of this deck after all, we can just cast it from the graveyard by flashing it back. Awesome card, can get out of hand really fast when you're able to generate a lot of tokens with the Necrobloom. Oldest card in the deck, Squandered Resources. This card doesn't have a newer reprint. This is the only available version. It was really hard to get my hands on a copy that's in a decent state, you get to sacrifice any land that produces mana of any color, and you get to add that mana to your mana pool. So you can tap a land and then sacrifice to get 2 mana. This is the main combo piece in our deck. I will explain the combos in the combo section later on in the video. Even when not using this for a combo, it just generates a ton of value which you can use to win the game with. Simple but solid card, Life from the Loam, serves as the perfect example of a support card, allows us to put lands from our grave into our hand, and has the ability Dredge tree. So we get to recur this card back and back and back. Really solid value engine, not the best card in the deck, but I'm a sucker for nostalgia. One of the most important cards in the deck is Finale of Devastation. It serves as a tutor both in your library and in your graveyard. When X is 10 or more, it even grants all the creatures you control, plus the one you just tutored, haste. This is one of the win cons in the deck. Generate a lot of tokens with Necrobloom or Field of the Dead. We cast Finale for a lot of mana and give all of them haste and just step them sideways and win the game. Also, when we're able to generate infinite mana, this is one of our outs to actually win the game from there. One of the most simple cards there is Eternal Witness, but such a crucial piece in the deck. Allows us to get something back for our graveyard, which is awesome in itself. Main purpose is getting the last card, Finale of Devastation, back into our hand if we milled it into our graveyard. Important recursion piece for our combo. I hate to break it to you guys, but Crucible of Worlds has just been power crept. You have a new Duskmourn card called Walking Closet. Left side is Crucible of Worlds, right side is Yawgmoth's Will. Later on in the game, you can just pay the 5 mana to open the other door and cast everything in your graveyard. We used to play Crucible until this got released. Sevin's Reclamation, another important combo piece. We actually use this to win the game when our entire library is milled into the graveyard. More up in the combo section later on in the video. Yeah, I'm that kind of guy. I actually play Aura Shards. Everyone hates playing against it, and at this point I even hate playing it. This is the most oppressive card in the deck. You have to have faced this or played it yourself to know how powerful and oppressive it is. Basically, when a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to destroy any artifact or enchantment. You make a lot of tokens. Every token you make, you get to destroy an artifact or enchantment. My recommendation, don't play this card. You will not be invited to game nights anymore. Court of Calling is a perfect fit for this deck. It's tutor with Convoke. Create a lot of tokens. The plants and the zombies allow you to convoke the spell and get out any of our big threats, being Lumra, Avengers, doesn't matter. Convoke is perfect for this deck. Dread Return actually surprised me in how useful it can be. For 4 mana, it's a standard reanimation spell, but you get to flashback it by sacrificing 3 creatures. You can just sacrifice any plants or zombies to reanimate a creature from your graveyard, which can easily win you the game outright. Also, when you self-mill this card and it's stuck in your graveyard, you can still use the flashback ability. You know I'm talking about Splendid Reclamation effects a lot in this video, right? We also play the card Splendid Reclamation. Simple card, does what a landfall card has to do. Returns all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This card will never be dead in your hand. You will always have a use because you play fetch lands, you always sacrifice lands, you always have targets for this. The card everyone was waiting for, Scape Shift. Yeah. It's Scape Shift. So you get to sacrifice any number of your lands and get that many new lands from your deck to the battlefield tapped. Beautiful thing is, they don't have to be basic lands. You can get any of your utility lands that you need at that time. Also fills the graveyard. You can get it back with Necrobloom. Best card for landfall by far. Change my mind. Next up, we'll be talking about the utility lands that you can get with Scape Shift, for example. Every deck needs graveyard hate. And in a landfall deck, what's better than Bojukabog? We play a lot of effects that allow us to get any land on instant speed and put it into play. Whenever an opponent is using his graveyard or trying to use his graveyard, you can just tutor a Bojukabog, put it into play, and exile the graveyard. I wasn't sure if I should put this card with the lands or with the creatures. Obviously, it's Dryad Arbor. Yeah, it's a 1/1 forest. Main purpose is we can get it to Greenstone Zenith for 0 and it accelerates us. Solid card, can be removed. Cannot tap it instantly when you play it, sadly enough. But yeah, has its uses. Glacial Chasm is a reason people will not want to play against your deck. They basically cannot win the game with this out on the battlefield. When you have this on the battlefield, it prevents all damage that will be dealt to you. It has the cost of having a cumulative upkeep, which keeps on growing every upkeep, so you have to pay more and more life. Beautiful thing is, you can also just decide not to pay it, sacrifice it, goes to the graveyard. For most decks, story's over, Glacial Chasm is gone. But we play Necrobloom. We can just dredge it back, play it in our main phase, so you basically get to play this over and over again. You don't have to pay the upkeep cost. It's called the Glacial Chasm lock. I will talk more about this in the combo section later. This is basically an upgraded Plains, Flaxlands of Torkir. Whenever this is put into your graveyard, you get to search your library for a Plains card, but into play tapped. It has awesome interactions with all of the cards we run that allow us to sacrifice lands. Basically acts as a ramp spell, but on land. So Bagenmorg, one of the cycle lands, when we have Necrobloom on the field, we can just pay 1, put this into the graveyard. Instead of drawing a card, we get to dredge this land back. So basically the card text just says 1 mana, mill 2. Awesome to fill our graveyard. You can also play the green variant, Tranquil Ticket. I play Urborg and Cabal Koffer, so black mana is better for me. I really don't think we have to talk about the next cards. Field of the Dead. When this is in play, you have 7 lands in play with a different name. You get to create 2/2 zombies. It's basically Necrobloom, but in a land. It's actually better than Necrobloom because lands are really hard to interact with. it. Barely anyone plays land removal or land destruction for specific lands. This is the win con of the deck. It just wins games. It's really powerful. It's hard to interact with. Creates a lot of tokens. It's crazy. It even taps for mana if you want. Another Modern Horizons 3 card. Uxa's Cave. Taps for mana. For 3 mana we can sacrifice it. Chew through our deck for any land. Put it into play. Perfect card. Simple but good. One of the more pricey cards to put in the deck is Boseiju Who Endures. You can play it. Just taps for green. Doesn't even enter tapped. And you can channel it to destroy any artifact or enchantment on the field. So it's perfect interaction. The best thing about the channel ability and why this card is so pricey is that it's impossible to interact with. You simply can't counter a channel ability. When Necrobloom on the field, you can also dredge this land, get it back, use the effect multiple times. It's a repeatable removal engine. Very solid pick, but pricey. Most people don't play Strip Mine in their Necrobloom decks. I do. I play a lot of 1v1, and that's where Strip Mine excels at. You can just step Strip Mine, destroy any land, and Strip Mine itself. Beautiful thing with Necrobloom is it also has Dredge in your graveyard, so you can get it back every turn, and every turn you get to destroy another land. Not that great in multiplayer games, but in 1v1 it's great. It's fantastic. Also a perfect fit if you're playing against other landfall players in your pot. So if you mainly play with 4 players, you could easily replace this with another card. Protection Tower, main reason we play this is so we can sacrifice our World Shaper or just get a little bit of extra mana. Also on the verge of cutting this one. For the moment I'm gonna keep playing it until a better land comes along. Another Modern Horizons 3 card. Shifting Woodland. I think this card was actually made with Necrobloom in mind. It's a solid land. Seeing playing a lot of combo decks, this is also one of our main combo enablers, but even without the combos, it's just a solid land. So when you have Delirium active by having 4 different card types in your graveyard, you pay 4 mana to have Shifting Woodland become a copy of any permanent in your graveyard. This enables a lot of combos, a lot of value strategies. We'll talk about this later, but this land is crazy. If you didn't know it yet, look it up. You can even play it in most non-landfall decks. We also play a Desert that pings 1 damage to an opponent when it enters. It's a horrible card, but we play a Loop, which makes it pretty awesome and actually gives us a way to win the game with. Talking about this later in the combo section. Takenuma, awesome value land, allows us to recur a lot of our creatures. Usually we have Necrobloom on the field, so the cost is not that high. Just recur a creature, dredge the land back, recur a creature, dredge the land back. Perfect for grindy games. I actually like this card a lot. Next up, Horizon of Progress. For 1 life, we get to add any color. Actually helps us fix our colors. We can also put 3 mana into it, tap it, and put a land card from our hand to the battlefield, giving us the ability to play lands on instant speed, which can help a lot with your landfall triggers. And we also get to sacrifice it later in the game to draw cards or dredge. Yavimaya, we play this for color fixing, makes any of your lands tap for green mana, which is the most important color in this deck. We also play everyone's favorite combo, Ugborg and Cabal Coffers. This combo allows you to generate a lot of mana. It's not the best combo in this deck since we don't really have that much outs for a lot of black mana. Actually thinking about cutting Cabal Coffers, Ugborg is just great for fixing color, so you should play Ugborg. Cabal Coffers is a maybe. The last but best utility land in this deck is Talon Gates of Madara. Also released in Modern Horizons 3. This is a land that phases out a creature when it enters the battlefield. So you can use it both offensively to phase out an opponent's creature, or you can phase out your Necrobloom to protect it. Now, you can't play lands on instant speed, so it doesn't really give interaction, but for 4 mana, you can put it into play from your hand on instant speed. So you get instant landfall, instant phasing out, and it's almost impossible to interact with. Since you can't counter it, you don't cast it, it's just a triggered ability. Awesome card, very underrated. Before we go to the combo section, I will be quickly going over the regular lands we run in this deck. So obviously, we're playing fetch lands with Necrobloom. It's self-explanatory, really. A fetch land allows you to have 2 landfall triggers instead of 1. Filters your deck, allows you to get surveil lands, shock lands. You should play as many fetch lands as possible. We also play 3 of the shock lands just to have targets to fetch. They're awesome for mana fixing, awesome for color fixing, just great lands in general. Next up are the surveil lands. Play 2 of them. Usually when you go fetch or you go look for a forest by tutoring any land, you get one of these just because they fill your graveyard, which is what you actually want to do in this deck. Perfect target for all of our fetch lands, a Triome. We play 1 that's all 3 colors we need, so it's perfect for color fixing. Later on in the game, we're also able to cycle it to draw a card or dredge it. Once again, why would we not play Command Tower? We actually sometimes have color problems in this deck. Command Tower helps out a lot. We can get it with any of our spells. The good cards in general, yeah. No reason not to. I don't really know what this land cycle is called. You can tap him, take 1 damage, and add 1 of 2 colors to your mana pool. Bonus benefit is we can also pay 1, sacrifice him, and then we get to draw a card or dredge a card when we have Necrobloom on the field. So yeah, pretty awesome late game when you're getting to that grind where you really need card advantage.
Why are you playing snow-covered basics in your deck, Dennis?
I'll tell you. So Field of the Dead and Necrobloom actually stake 7 differently named lands. Forest and snow-covered forest actually count as 2 different named lands. So yeah, Play one of each snow-covered basic land. Last but not least, most important part of any deck, basic lands. We play 7 of them. We just need targets for our ramp spells. We need targets to fetch. Since we go through our lands really fast in this deck, we need to play a lot of basics. 1 swamp, 2 plains, 4 forests. Welcome to the combo section of the video. I'll be going over game-winning combos and card interactions between 2 or multiple cards in general. First up, we have a 2-card interaction between World Shaper and Phyrexian Tower. World Shaper is an awesome card, but we do need a way to sacrifice it. Phyrexian Tower is a land we can tutor up with any of the other cards in the deck. Solid interaction, free Splendid Reclamation effect. Awesome. More obvious combo many decks play is Cabal Coffers and Urbugger. So Urbugger turns every land you have into a swamp. Cabal Coffers gives mana equal to the swamps you control. Obvious interaction, generates a lot of mana. We can easily tutor up these 2 cards in this deck. The card we do really have to talk about in this deck is Glacial Chasm. When this is on the battlefield, you cannot take any damage as a player. Basically, you cannot lose a game by damage. Ultimate protection from any deck that relies on dealing damage or combat or whatever. People will not attack you anymore. As long as you control Glacial Chasm, your creatures cannot attack, but we have many ways to sacrifice it and end this negative effect for ourselves. It has a cumulative upkeep of paying 2 life. So every upkeep it will get a time counter and you will have to pay 2 life per time counter on it. You can also choose to not pay the upkeep and it gets sacrificed and goes to the graveyard. Beautiful thing is, when you have Necrobloom on the field, every upkeep you can just sacrifice this, and when you go to your draw step, instead of drawing, you can just dredge back Glacial Chasm, creating some sort of a soft lock Glacial Chasm where you can just keep getting back Glacial Chasm, and your opponents can only interact with it by removing Glacial Chasm or exiling your graveyard. In these days, not many players run direct land removal or graveyard hate. They're so centered around their own strategy and winning the game that they don't play much interaction. So most people cannot deal with this, and you cannot lose the game. You can just keep recurring it, and once you have built a solid board state, you can just sacrifice it and win the game from there. Grindy games is where Necrobloom really shines, and Glacial Chasm buys us the time to get to late game or to the grindy stage of the game. Another awesome 2-card combo with Necrobloom is Cultivator Colossus. You basically just need 1 land in your hand and your graveyard filled with lands. So when Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, you get to put 1 land from your hand into play. When you do, you get to repeat the process and draw a card. Instead of drawing a card, we will be replacing it by dredging 2 if we have Necrobloom on the field, providing us another land. So we just keep going through the cycle and we're able to put our entire library into our graveyard. And we can always combo from there. I will show you in a later combo. Beautiful thing about the cycle is once you're in it, your opponents don't get priority. So the cycle has to finish before someone can interact with whatever you're doing. Another awesome combo engine is the Gitarok monster. Whenever any land gets put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to draw a card. Instead, we can just dredge 2 cards. And when one of those 2 dredged cards is a land, we get to draw another card and also being able to replace it with dredge once again. So usually when you have Gitarok on the field and any way to put a land to your graveyard to mill your entire library. Another combo I talked about earlier in the video is a combination of Dryad Arbor and Springheart Nantico. For this we need Lotus Cobra, Ornissa Resurgent Animist, or Tireless Provisioner. We need 2 of those. We need Dryad Arbor on the field, and we have to have Springheart Nantico bestowed on the Dryad Arbor. So whenever you play a land, you get 2 mana, one from Lotus Cobra or Tireless Provisioner, whatever 2 you have in play. When land enters, Nantico triggers, and you get to pay 2 mana to create a copy of Dryad Arbor. When you do, you get a copy of Dryad Arbor, another 2 landfall triggers, another 2 mana, another opportunity to copy Dryad Arbor. This combo will grant you infinite landfall triggers, infinite copies of Dryad Arbor, and you can usually win the game from there. The main way we win the game is using a 3-card combo. We need Aftermath Analyst in the graveyard, squandered resources on the battlefield, shifting woodland into play. We also need 4 different card types in our graveyard to activate Delirium, and we need 8 lands that can produce mana. Combo works as follows. We sacrifice all 8 of our lands to squandered resources, generating 8 mana in the process. Then we use 4 of that mana to activate Shifting Woodland, turning it into a copy of Aftermath Analyst. Using the 4 remaining mana, we use the ability of the copy of Aftermath Analyst to sacrifice itself and also Shifting Woodland, so it goes to the graveyard. The ability states that all lands in our graveyard come back to the battlefield tapped, so we get back Shifting Woodland and all of our lands. From here we can repeat the process over and over again, just keep sacrificing all our lands to squandered resources to generate infinite mana, infinite landfall triggers, and we usually have a way to win from there. It's not that hard to do. This is the main combo in the deck. The ways to win are getting Finale of Devastation, using the infinite mana to grant all of your zombies haste. Since you have infinite landfall triggers and Field of the Dead, you can give everything haste plus X equaling your infinite mana. Or we can also win getting Kyriose Heat, pinging 1 damage every time it enters the battlefield. And it's on an infinite cycle, so we can just ping 1 damage infinitely to everyone. So the way to win the game with your entire library into the graveyard is as follows. You flashback Savine's Reclamation, giving you the ability to return 2 permanents with mana cost 3 or less to the battlefield. You You choose these targets, 6 and Squandered Resources. With these 2 cards on the battlefield, you have to generate 6 mana. Usually you can do this with Squandered Resources by sacrificing 6 lands. And then you use 6 Retrace ability to recast Lumira. When Lumira enters the battlefield, you get Shifting Woodland back, and you can start the Analyst combo all over again, as explained earlier. Generating infinite mana, infinite zombies, infinite landfall, whatever. You can win the game from there. Those are the main and strongest combos in the deck. You have a lot of other cards that combo really well and synergize with each other, but this would be a 10-hour video if I have to talk about everything. So that's my Necrobloom deck. If you have any questions, suggestions, your version of your Necrobloom deck, feel free to let us know in the comments below or on our Discord server. I'm always in the mood to talk about Necrobloom. So like and subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more of these coming up in the future, and I'll see you next time. Peace!